Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to TNT Farming Solutions, TNT Talk Time. And on this December 18th, 2025, we're going to be talking about the 2025 trials that were done in cooperation with Rise Bio. So we're actually going to be going through some of the highlights and takeaways of that study. So grab a pencil and paper for notes. We're going to be I'm just like I said, it's going to be highlights and takeaways. There's a way more data in the trials than what I'm presenting here. And I will be able to pull up some of the tables and stuff afterwards if you're interested and you want me to pull that up. Um, but it's going to be a general overview. So, what we're going to be doing today is we're going to go over the trials that were done this year. We're going to review some of the positive responses that we saw from the trial. And of course, we're going to do some of the negative responses, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Now, that doesn't mean yield data and ROI is ugly, but we are going to go over that as well. Because, of course, at the end of the day, that's what matters. ROI. What does it do to your pocketbook, your wallet, your bank account? So, TNT trials that we did them in conjunction with Rise Bio, which is a consulting firm, and they analyzed both the soil and the rhizosphere, as well as they did tissue analysis at various stages throughout the season. And that was done in conjunction with Jared Burkholder, who did a soybean trial, which we did those types of tests as well. But his primary focus was to see the impact of the high energy fish on soybean cyst nematode populations, because in his fields that he's been using the high energy fish for 3 years, he has seen about a 97% reduction in soybean cyst nematode counts in his soils from over 10,000 down to about 300. So he's done this test in this particular field this year to see if he can have an impact on soybean cyst nematode populations by the use of the high energy fish. And then, of course, Mark Dodd as well. And I think he's in Ohio. So, as far as the corn goes, what we did with the corn, so the control for the corn, because of course, ideally you would want to use absolutely nothing and then use whatever you want to see what its impact is going to be. But realistically, most farmers don't use nothing, they usually use something. So, this particular farmer who's participating in these trials with Mark Dodd, this was, part of his program was 5 gallons of 824 liquid pop up with 10 gallons of 28 UAN and a 2x2, and then 60 gallons of 28 as a side by side at V4 or 5, I think, and then around VT, I think is when they put, I put quit, it's quilt, XL fungicide. So what we did in the first trial and the second trial is we reduced the 824 from 5 gallons to 3 gallons. So there's a little bit of a reduction in fertilizer use and a cost savings there. We also added 2 quarts of high energy fish in both trials. In trial 1, we retained the 10 gallons of 28 in the 2x2, but in trial 2, we removed it and we replaced it with 2 gallons of Super Salmon Plus. So it's basically a trial to see, if we can remove all of the additional nitrogen inputs. And then we then did a tissue analysis later on in the season. And on both the trial 1 with only high energy fish and trial 2 with high energy fish and Super Salmon Plus, it was determined that additional nitrogen was not needed. And so the 60 gallons of 28% that was put on the control, as the normal practice and program that the farmer uses, was not applied to trial 1 or trial 2. So you had a reduction of 60 gallons of nitrogen on both those plots. So the trial 2 with the Super Salmon Plus had no supplemental nitrogen other than what was in the original 3 gallons of 824 that was put in trench at planting. Both the trial 1, trial 2 with the high energy fish had no fungicide, no quilt applied to them. And they both had a gallon of high energy spray as well. And that was put on at the same time as what the Quilt XL was put on, so around tassel time, so later on in the season. So there's the difference in the two trials compared to the control plot. For the soybean, the control had none, and the trial spot had 3 gallons of high energy fish and half a gallon of Super Salmon Plus with 1 gallon of squid juice and 1 pint each of 2 different microbials that Jared was using. I can't remember what those were. Some of the positive responses that we saw was increase in microbial diversity from between 420 and 1390%. So diversity increase with the use of the high energy fish and also the Super Salmon Plus. Microbial evenness, so the distribution of the different species in the soil with the different replicates that were taken was increased. So the span of difference was decreased. So your evenness is increased and your variability is decreased. So you hear a lot of talk about precision ag, and have all these variable rates of this, that, and the other thing. When you have more even microbial activity, you have more even nutrient uptake, you have more even plant response, and you don't really need that precision ag with variable rates all over the place. Having said that, this field that this was done in was very variable from sandy all the way through to clay. So as the different trials and control plots were actually in quite different soils, so that added some interesting things to the plot. Calcium increased between 10 to 20% in the rhizosphere. In one instance, it actually resulted in a substantial increase, over 45% in the plant tissue. And another one, the other trial actually had a 25% lower calcium level in the tissue. So I guess it depends on what's going on in the field and moisture levels. And I think there was some drought in this field, which would also impact the uptake of various different things. There was no difference in plant nitrogen, where there was no additional nitrogen added. It was essentially the same as the control. And it was up 14% in the high energy fish only trial, where there was 10 gallons of 28 put in the 2x2 at planting. So essentially the plants had plenty of nitrogen. Plant molybdenum levels were up 37 to 47%. And I don't believe that there was any molybdenum supplemented to these plants. So this is significant when you know that molybdenum is used as a catalyst for converting nitrates, which is like a dinner bell for insects. It's a form of nitrogen that they can metabolize and digest and convert those nitrates to amino acids and proteins in the plant, which insects can't digest, right? So important. 86 to 92% reduction in penicillium in the soil. So again, we don't talk about disease suppressive soils. Penicillium can be a pathogen that causes cob rot and molds on the grain, and specifically in corn as well. 78 to 80% reduction in fusarium. So that's significant. Again, that's in the soil. So if it's not in the soil, then it's less likely to be blown up or splashed up onto the plants in order to infect the plants and then cause problems with mycotoxins later on in the season. Arthrobacter, which is a nitrogen fixer and a nutrient cycler, was up 69 to 82%. So that's significant. Free living nitrogen fixer in the soil. So hence, one of the reasons why the plants had sufficient nitrogen. Bradyrhizobium is another nitrogen fixer. It also provides plant growth hormones and modulates and stimulates the plant's immune system. It was up 29 to 215%. It also cycles nutrients in the soil. So that's a good one there. And the number of abundant pathogens was reduced by 30 to 47%. So that's significant as well. So again, the promotion of disease suppressive soils. And the last sample that we did was at V8, I think it was. Let me just check. Yes, V8. And at that point, the control soils were showing tar spot, where they weren't showing it early in the year, but they were showing it at V8. The treated soils were not. There was no tar spot found in the treated plots, but it was found in the control plot. So I know that's a pathogen of concern in corn these days. Maybe something to keep an eye open on and watch. Now, of course, we don't want to glance over the negative responses, so let's have a look and see what happened there. So we had soil and root sulfur levels dropped, but the tissue levels were higher. So you may need to supplement with a little bit of sulfur to replace that. Soil manganese levels dropped, but again, tissue levels were higher. Soil copper levels dropped, but again, tissue levels were higher. So while the soil levels, what you see on a soil test or around the root zone was lower, obviously there's something that's being, a mechanism that's being triggered that is allowing for the crop to take up what's being solubilized and take it into the tissues more effectively. Aspergillus, which is another pathogen that causes corn ear rot, was up 111 to 393%. So that's a potential concern. Aspergillus will increase when there's environmental stresses like drought or excessively wet or excessively dry, or so. And I think there was some drought in this field, which could explain why this proliferated so much in response to those stresses. Now, aspergillus is also beneficial because it's one of the fungi that helps to break down the residue and cycle nutrients. So the problem is when the aspergillus thinks that your plant is scrap residue when it's not quite there yet and gets into it. So, and alternaria was also up between 11 to 138%. And while it can produce disease in a healthy plant, the alternaria is actually beneficial by suppressing and outcompeting other pathogenic fungi. In exchange for that, when the plant starts to senesce or when it becomes nutrient deficient or stressed, and then the alternaria figures that, oh, well, the plant's on its way out, now it's my turn, and it then manifests itself and does its thing, and then we perceive that and we see that as a disease outbreak. So, but while the plant's healthy, the alternaria actually wards off other ouchies. So it's kind of a two-way street there. So on Jared Burkholder's soybean trial, in his going out into the field to check and see how things were progressing, they were growing well. He was pulling up. If you were listen to if you were on the June call, I think he was on that. He was discussing the trials and pulling up some pictures with root mass, the vegetative mass, and the nodules were higher in the test plot. And he was really, really happy with how the test plot looked and how it's progressing. However, nature refused to cooperate and brought on drought. About 6 weeks without any rain, right at the pod fill stage. And so that basically caused the owner of that field, the farmer who he was working with, to just basically give up and call it quits on that field, basically to scrap it. So those decisions are made when you have crops that you see aren't going to, make it would have been nice to see the poor yield versus really poor yield, or, something like that, but the farmer shut her down. But there is good news, because the actual reason why Jared did the test to check on the soybean cyst nematode numbers, he will still be able to do that next spring. And there was plenty of growth there on the soybeans in the field, that should the soybean cyst nematodes have proliferated and continued, then we should have some numbers in the spring. Or if what he's hoping, like he's seen in his field, the numbers actually drop, then you should be able to see that too. So stay tuned. We might have some more information for you in the spring. So now let's get to yield and calculating return on investment. So just a few things that we're going to assume in order for us to do a return on investment calculation. We are going to assume that if we have an increase in yield compared to the control, because the price of corn varies anywhere between 4 and 5 bushel an acre, we're just going to assume that if we have an increase in yield, we're going to apply $4 per bushel for that. And if we have a decrease in yield, we're going to apply $5 per bushel, just to shift the ROI so that it makes it a little bit more difficult to justify the ROI, so if you get a good number, then you know that it's more likely to hold true. On the 824, I've used a $6 per gallon cost. And most of these prices I've based on the Canadian prices, because I don't have anything for US. So, and then I converted it and whatnot. 20% UAN, I use 50 cents per pound on a nitrogen basis. So that works out at 3 pounds per gallon. That works out to about $1.50 per gallon of the UAN. Quilt XL is about, and it depends on if you get the actual Quilt XL or you get a generic or whatever. It can be anywhere between $7 and $13 an acre. So I figured, well, $10 an acre. I just averaged it at $10 an acre. High energy fish, I averaged about $5 a quarter, about $20 a gallon. High energy spray, $15 a gallon. And Super Salmon Plus, $15 a gallon. So the calculation, I'm going to go through this table here. The dry yield versus the control. Obviously, the difference between the control and the control is 0. So there's no difference. Trial 1, where we use the high energy fish in trench and reduce the 824 liquid starter from 5 gallons to 3 gallons, and kept the 10-gallon 2x2 28, and removed the quilt but added high energy spray. We got a 15 bushel per acre increase. So 238 was the trial, 223 was the control. And you can see here, there's some variability in the field, right? Trial 2, where we did high energy fish and Super Salmon Plus in trench, with the no 28 at planting or Y drop later on in the season, no quilt XL and high energy spray, we ended up with 232 bushel per acre versus 245 in the control strips. So there was a 13 bushel per acre drop in yield there. So you might think, oh boy, we're not done yet. So on the revenue from those plots on the control, we're going to call that the baseline. Trial 1, we had 15 bushel per acre. Remember, we said $4 per bushel if we got an increase. So that works out to $60 per acre, $60 per acre. And on the 13 bushel drop times $5 per bushel, $65 drop versus the baseline. So on your expenses, your 5 gallons of liquid starter was $30 and 3 gallons was 18. So $12 difference there. Your 28% with 10 gallons in trench and 60 gallons later on in the season worked out to about $105. On the high energy fish trial, we only put $15 in trench. And trial 2, 0. Nothing. So you saved $105 there. Quilt XL about $10, so that was neither here nor there. High energy fish was about $10. Super Salmon Plus was $30. and high energy spray was 15. So at the end of the day, your inputs expense on your control was $145. So whatever money you would have made from your yield here, you're down $145 from your expenses. On your high energy fish, your total inputs was $58. You made an extra 60, so you're $2 ahead, but you didn't spend this $145. So you're actually $147 ahead from your control. And on your high energy fish, Super Salmon Plus with no nitrogen whatsoever, with the Super Salmon Plus in trench, you're out $65 on the yield. You spent $73 instead of 58 on inputs, but you didn't spend 145. So while you are still down $138, you're not down 145, so you're still $7 ahead over the control. So even though you had less yield, you have $7 more per acre in your pocket. So not terrible. So, and obviously there's differences in the soil as well with that. And I mean, I've got the soil tests and stuff to see that that was different. So the key takeaways from these studies is that yes, natural soil amendments, when they work with these soil microbes, can improve release and cycling of nutrients in the soil, which can allow for you to reduce your synthetic inputs, which can decrease your costs. The addition of natural soil amendments can also help foster disease suppressive soils. We can see that with the reduced number of pathogens, both in the number of pathogens, but also reduction in the populations of individual pathogens as well. And as we just saw with ROI, we can justify the addition of natural amendments like high energy fish in your program, your system, in order to help restore the soil's functionality. And the more that you use them, the longer you use them, the more the soil recovers, the healthier it gets, the more efficiently it recycles nutrients, and less of the synthetic fertilizers that you'll need. Remember that third plot, the trial 2, with absolutely no additional 28 nitrogen, that's basically that soil went cold turkey, right, on no nitrogen. And it still did reasonably well. So as you continue to use those types of practices and you build the soil resilience and diversity and response, then that gets better and better. And as far as quotable quotes, I can't remember who initially said this, but if you don't have some kind of failure in farming this year, then you haven't tried enough things. You can't always have successes. And if everything's been a success, then you haven't tried enough. You got to try something, and you don't have to try stuff that you know is going to fail. That obviously doesn't make any sense, but you got to try a bunch of different things. I'm going to open it up to Q&A now, and I'm going to allow participants to unmute themselves. There we go.
Nadjia, I want to ask
Yep.
if Keenan from Rise Bio, are you still on the call? Keenan, is he still available?
Hey,
Josh,
yeah,
Josh is there.
I have just a couple more minutes. I think Josh and I are both on the call.
Yep.
Okay. Well, good to have you.
How'd I do, Josh?
Oh, it was great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Really good, especially on the microbial side. The taxonomic identification was great.
Yeah. There was some ones where it went up in one and down in the other, and I'm like, okay. Like, I wanted to just, I couldn't, there's so many things to go through, right? I just wanted
Oh, yeah.
to highlight the ones where there was, both of them went up or both of them went down. Something that was common across the board that I could address quickly, efficiently in the presentation. So any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Because we do have Josh and Keenan here who have peered over this data, I believe, with a lot more scrutiny than I have. They should be able to help if I get stumped.
Yeah, I apologize for calling you out, but I feel the same way. I thought, well, no, You guys have really done the deep dive into all this information, and if there's anything you might think would be a positive to add to the discussion, please do so.
I thought y'all did great. I think unless Josh has anything really interesting, I noticed you had mentioned earlier that we're kind of working on some more deep dives into this, and I was just going to kind of tease a little bit. We found some cool kind of correlations in the data where we were able to see that across farms where soil nitrate had positive responses to treatment, we also saw increases in tissue nitrogen uptake. So just some kind of little things like that where we're able to look across the entire kind of profile from the soil nutrients up into tissue and see that things are being unlocked. Yeah, I don't have too much I want to call out specifically, but yeah, just kind of little teasers of kind of some of the things we hope to deliver in that written analysis soon.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else with some questions or comments?
Yeah, one question that I have, Jared McKelly here out in California.
Hi, Jared.
Uh, why do you suppose that some of those soil nutrients, the sulfur, manganese, and so on, why do you suppose that they dropped in the soil but raised in the tissue levels, and how would that action actually take place?
So the way that this study was designed is we're looking at nutrient use efficiency. Typically, when we see a drop in, you have to consider this is control versus treated, right? So looking at the difference between the control and the treated, if certain nutrients are being mobilized, then we would expect a reduction in the availability of that specific micronutrient to go down. And then at the same time, we would expect increase in microbes associated with mobilizing that nutrient. And then we would expect an increase in the tissue availability. So that's a typical trend that we see is a reduction in the soil available nutrient, increase in microbes associated with mobilizing that nutrient, and then an increase in the tissue. Now, those nutrient cycling dynamics, they change and they fluctuate throughout the season. In some instances where maybe the plant isn't demanding a specific nutrient, like for instance, I would say nitrogen at later growth stages, we would see, storage of nitrogen in the soil and then turning off of the microbes associated with mobilizing that nutrient and then stability and the nitrogen levels in the tissue. So it's just kind of a way to look at nutrient use efficiency.
That's fascinating. So, if I understood that correctly, it's not necessarily that it was a negative. It actually helped solubilize, helped made that more bioavailable.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yep. It just
Wow.
looks when you look at the soil analysis, it looks like, oh my nutrient levels are way low. This is terrible. But when you look at the other pieces of the puzzle, then you can see that they're lower because the plant is actually sucking it up as fast as it's being made available, right? And
Yeah.
that
Absolutely.
transfer is efficient. And I've seen that in long-term organic fields that have had enough time to basically break down a lot of the toxins that have been put on it, 10 plus years in organics where they have, single digit phosphorus numbers on a soil test. You would think that's just absolutely horrible. You can't grow anything on it. And then when you do a tissue analysis through the season, the phosphorus numbers are fine in the plant. So obviously the soil is making sufficient phosphorus available and it's being translocated to the plant, which is kind of how the natural system is intended to work so that you don't have excess soluble phosphorus in the soil that's going to then
Mhm.
leach and go out to the rivers and lakes and stuff, right? So that's just what's the smart way to do it.
Yeah. And to provide a little bit more context, so the soil fertility analysis was shaken off of the roots of the plant. So it's not like we're taking cores from the middle of the rows. The soil that was collected was from the root ball of the crop. And so in replications, we're looking at a lot of different plants. And when you look at that, and I'm looking at this data now, in some instances, we saw a substantial reduction in the nutrient that's in that root ball, and that's because it's being mobilized and pushed into the crop. And we typically see, kind of in the later growth stages, photosynthesis is improved. We have more carbon fixation. So we're improving the microbial available carbon that's in that root zone to kind of replenish some of those macro micronutrients that were lost due to the plant demanding that nutrient throughout the season. It's a really interesting way to look at the data.
Oh, fascinating. It's essentially optimizing all of the properties and processes going on within the immediate rhizosphere, yeah?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Wow. Wow. Fascinating. Great work, guys.
Oh, thank you.
And then, the bulk of those micronutrients and everything, as long as you're not removing the stubble, and if you're allowing that to cycle and break down, then that then becomes available eventually over the next couple of years. And that's how you can build up bioavailable nutrient levels in the soil, right?
We actually did see increased levels of the organic carbon breakdown genes that we look for in the treated areas. I think that was one of the treatment effects that we noticed. So
Mhm.
yeah, we can see
Yeah.
that right from the kind of horse's mouth. We're breaking that down faster to then feed those microbes who can then go and perform those nutrient cycling functions, or the product is anyway.
So in a way, is that essentially creating the development of humics or fulvics in that
Exactly.
zone? Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
And so that's what we're looking for, is the microbial pathways that actually create those, humics and fulvic acids and the organic acids that they're using that will build humus out of that kind of organic matter that's in the soil. So, or those complex organics. Yeah.
Absolutely fascinating, guys.
Mhm.
And I think at the end of the season, or closer to V8, at V8, we saw a 24% uptick or increase in soil available carbon, 25% increase in soil available carbon. So that is primarily due to water extractable organic carbon, which, if y'all are familiar with the Haney analysis, H2O extracted carbon, I would say, and if you talk to the Haneys or people that are familiar with that type of test, the water extractable organic carbon is probably one of the most important metrics in the Haney analysis, because that is the one metric on the Haney analysis that's correlated with pretty heavily with yield out in the field. So
Yeah, because that's your water soluble carbon feed source for your soil microbes, right?
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of a quick and dirty way of doing that, if you wanted to do that out in your own field, is bring a bucket of water
Hmm.
and dig up a corn plant, and you don't have to knock off all the dirt. If you're sandy soil, you want to try and maintain some soil on it, and then you just dunk that in the bucket like you would a mop and
Hmm.
swoosh it around, and then leave it sit there and see how much it foams up. And that kind of
Yeah.
gives you an idea of how much soluble food is available to the microbes, which you've washed off the roots with the food, and they start going at it, and then they form a froth on the surface of the water. That's a quick and dirty infield test of that rhizosphere activity.
Good to
It's
know.
similar
I'll
to
have
how
to use that on the fly.
Hmm.
it's actually a similar method to how they measure the microbial respiration in the Haney test, or similar principle anyway. You're kind of seeing that same phenomena, I
Yeah,
think, happening.
yeah. And in the Haney test, they got instruments to measure the CO2 that comes off of it and everything, and all you're doing is looking at it
Exactly.
foam and bubbles. So
But yeah,
it's a very
it's qualitative instead of quantitative, but that's okay.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
Fascinating.
it's good way to do a pulse check on your field, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. One thing I really wanted to highlight in this analysis, and something that is really critical, especially in these really complicated agricultural ecosystems, is the control sample without treatment or anything like that. It was in the 1 to 5 percentile as it relates to diversity and evenness. What that means is you have one or two, maybe three microbes that are completely dominating that system. Could have been a fusarium, or I'll have to look back to exactly what that is. It's a Pseudomonas
Yeah, probably
genera.
Pseudomonas.
Pseudomonas genera that was dominating 55% of that ecosystem. And after treatment with this product, what we're seeing is that a lot of those native microbial populations were able to recolonize the root system. And that sample went from the lowest that we typically see when we do this type of analysis as it relates to the number of microbes and the amount of competition in that environment to one of the most diverse it went all the way up to the 73rd percentile. So it went from the lowest to, just about average. So it got that whole system to about average of what we would see in an
No, a bit
agricultural
above
system.
average.
A
50
bit,
would be
a
average.
bit
So
above.
we're a bit above, or yeah, reasonably above average there. Just to, yeah,
Yeah,
definitely agree with what you're saying, but yeah,
in one
even better.
season. In one season.
In
So
one season.
yeah, imagine where it would be next year and the year after, right?
Mhm.
That's right.
Yep.
So from a numbers perspective, just at that initial V2, which is 2 weeks of propagation, we saw an 11% increase in the number of genera, which is about 300 different microbes that we saw colonize the rhizosphere. And then that went up to 3,100 microbes. And then it kind of stabilized at V8. But yeah, pretty significant increase in the number of microbes observed in the root system.
And we saw that the some of the ouchies were reduced, which allowed room for the beneficials to move in and colonize, right?
Mhm.
So
I think that's actually often how that happens is a competitive displacement. The good guys can kind of come in and shoulder out elbow out the bad guys a little bit.
yep. First come, first serve, right? I'm here first,
Yep.
get out.
Unfortunately, my computer died, so I missed that last little part. I'll be eager to catch up on the recording so that we don't need to repeat that at all. But could any of that be contributed, at least the part that I caught, to the same sort of effect that Nadja mentioned with the nitrates and how in tissues that typically increases pest pressure? Is a similar process going on with the pests, the microorganisms in the soil? Is that what's suspected as well, or?
That's a Keenan question.
That's a really good question. There's a lot that goes into the kind of different forms of inorganic and organic nitrogen that the plant is using. I will say that we have our organic nitrogen breakdown metric as well. That kind of is, similar to the carbon, but it'll end up producing those amino acids and protein precursors and urea in the soil for the plant to uptake. And I generally would say that the plant will have a better time converting nitrates into more complex forms of nitrogen or organic molecules in the presence of good macros and micros, basically, and even some of those trace elements. I think Nadja had mentioned molybdenum there as well. So yeah, if you have a healthy microbiome and you're able to cycle some of those micronutrients really well, you actually set the plant up to be able to make those conversions. So I think actually what you're getting at probably makes a lot of sense that it's just kind of a roundabout way to get there. I think that yeah, that kind of generalized improved nutrition will allow the plant to perform those secondary functions of trying to move more of its nitrogen into more stable forms.
Yeah, and then some of the organisms like the Brady rhizobium, they don't produce nitrates
Right.
or even ammonium. They produce amino acids and some other form of nitrogen that's more complex form. So the plant's
Mm.
actually pulling up the half-built protein already, right? So it makes the
Mhm.
nitrogen use even that much more efficient when the plant doesn't have to build the nitrogen containing compounds from scratch, right? It's able
Yeah.
to get the microbes in the soil to do some of the prefabrication, right?
Yeah. One of the things, and we've looked at this data a lot of, looked into a lot of these different types of reports. And what we've learned is that the early colonization of the root system is really indicative of future plant health. And that's what we saw in the instance of what happened here. At week 2, and we're talking specifically about the nitrogen cycle. At week 2, when we pulled the root sample from the field, and this is with the high energy mix, We saw an increase of about 12% of nitrification, which is converting ammonium into nitrates and nitrites. And then we saw a reduction of about 38% in denitrification. Denitrification is nitrogen loss. So nitrates are N2 gas offset. And so what's happening here is that this product is stabilizing and keeping the nitrates in the soil. And we saw a slight increase in the tissue levels at the earlier growth stages, just at around 10%. And then going to V5 of the crop's life cycle, we held that 10% increase in the tissue nitrogen. And then at V8, we actually saw a 14% increase in the tissue nitrogen. And then, we started to see a little bit more nitrification, which is conversion of nitrate or ammonium to nitrates and nitrites. But a lot of that nitrogen uptick or improvement in the plant available nitrogen happened in those earlier growth stages because similar to, a human gut microbiome, when infants are eating the right foods, it's a precursor for how that human is gonna be as it relates to their health later on. And the same applies to the plant. We're seeing improvements in organic nitrogen breakdown, reductions in nitrogen loss early on in the plant's life cycle, and that translated into improvements later on in the season. And so it's a common theme that we're seeing throughout these types of reports.
Gosh, that sounds amazing between the science and the products. It's very, very exciting news on the
Yeah.
call. One last thing, so I'm not taking up everybody's time, but essentially one of the crops that I specialize in is hemp production. And one of the things that fascinates me by that is its ability to bioremediate soils. Could it be argued that products like this make phytoremediation more effective for plants that have those capabilities?
When you say phytoremediation, what are you explicitly referring to?
Basically, just using photosynthesis to try to extract and remediate soils.
Yeah, so if you
I
have a soil that's contaminated with lead, let's say, then you would
yeah.
grow the hemp on there, and hemp likes to pull up all kinds of stuff, which is why you really got to test that stuff. So
Yes,
he's asking basically if you were to use a high energy fish, would it amplify that plant's ability to work with the soil microbes to extract even more from the soil?
I would generally think yes. I mean, there certainly are microbes involved with siderophore production and chelation of minerals, and it's not just iron. That's kind of what's more well defined because it's a needed plant nutrient. But some of those others, again, yeah, lead and copper or whatever you might have in the soil, they also have multiple valence states and can be transformed by microbes to something that's more plant available or just, yeah, more mobile in the environment. So at least kind of mechanistically, I think it makes sense. And even by a similar process to what we were talking before, that if there's a better baseline nutrient environment that the plant is living in, it's potentially more able to kind of do those secondary functions. So I think there's a couple ways you could look at it, but it at least makes sense to me, mechanistically.
yeah, no, you guys are making this make sense to me too, and thank you, Nadja, for saying my question even better.
That's a great question. One of the biomarkers that we're looking at or, considering is it's called xyloglyph. Am I saying that right, Keenan?
Xenoglyph.
Xenoglyph, which
Yeah.
has a lot to do with some of these heavier chemical degradators.
It basically just means foreign molecules, foreign particles, of plastics or yeah, any synthetic chemistry or pesticides, all that sort of stuff that could be in soil and how microbes can break those down. So we're working on some pathways to be able to read into that.
That's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
So glyphosate might be one of those.
Exactly.
And AMPA,
Hmm.
atrazine would be nice.
Hmm.
Get rid of that
I think we are
nasty.
looking into that as well. I think there is a defined pathway for atrazine degradation.
Well, there is for everything.
Some of it, the literature, the science is still kind of trying hard to catch up and identify the specific genes that are responsible for some of those functions. So we're
Mhm.
trying to stay on the cutting edge and learning, which of those microbes can actually do it, and how we can find it in our data.
Yep. It doesn't matter what the adversary can throw at us. The
Mhm.
creator has made ways to counter it one way or
Mhm.
another. So
That's right.
I can't remember which microbe it is. I put it in a presentation several years back, but there's a microbe that actually converts methyl mercury, which is bioavailable mercury, which is like terrible, into
Yeah.
a non-reactive, non-bioavailable form. God even created a microbe to detoxify mercury. So it's amazing. It's out of everything.
Well, it is time for me to run, guys, but thanks for having me on. It was a really great
Oh,
Yep.
discussion. So
Thank
thank
thanks
you
you,
for
for
your
Keenan.
Thank you,
feedback,
Thanks,
guys.
Keenan.
Keenan.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you,
Yeah.
Keenan.
thanks. Take care, everybody.
Yep.
Yes.
Any other questions? I
I did
think,
just want to add specifically on the high energy, we had across the board with, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, really no change at V8, but sulfur most definitely. And then iron, 52% increase, and manganese stability. We saw almost across the board increases in all of the plant tissue available nutrients at V8, which I think is pretty telling of how great this product did.
no, I don't think we tested bricks on the tissues, but that would have been interesting
Yeah.
because as soon as you bump the bricks up on those plants, all sorts of wonderful things happen with suppressing insect attack and stimulating the soil microbiome through increased exudates. It's kind of a positive feedback loop. Increase nutrients, which then allow the plant to increase photosynthesis, which increases sugar production, which then increases the exudates, which increases the food to the microbes, which then increases nutrients, which then increases photosynthesis, and so on and so forth. And that's where you want to be.
Mhm.
I'd like to thank everybody for joining us to kind of discuss this and go over. We've had some sneaky suspicions of what's been going on, and we've seen good positive reports from people, but it's always show me the money. Well, we gave the money to Josh and his company, but they're showing us the data. So it's nice to get some numbers and data to back up what we're seeing. We'll call it anecdotally through reports. We may be doing some additional trials in the future as well. If we do that, we'll definitely keep everyone up to date posted on that. But if there are no other questions, then we'll sign off.
I just want to add to what you just said there, Nadja. This is Bob. I want to thank you, those that got on the call today. And as far as that goes, I'd like to hear from you any other comments you might have or questions, but you can help influence additional testing that we might consider doing here at TNT, Jim Nadja and myself. So if this type of a forum, research and getting back and reporting to you people is beneficial, helpful, helps together, we can, as I said a long time ago when we first started TNT Talk Times, nobody's ever done a study on this fermented whole salmon. It's never been done. I said, we got to write the book as we go along. Part of writing that book is getting people like Rise Bio involved in collecting that data and telling us what we're seeing, what's the science behind it, what is the effect of this, that, and the other, and all of us learning that together. So if you wouldn't mind, people, when you have an opportunity, give me a shout. Let me know what you think about tonight. And again, thank you all for your attending tonight. I hope you were blessed by some of the things you heard. There might be some new thoughts and things stirring up in you that might hopefully be beneficial to your next growing season. And I want to say God bless you all. I appreciate you.
Likewise, very informative and appreciate you guys. And I hope everybody has Merry Christmas.